The crystalline gates of Station Nexus 7 parted with a musical chime, revealing the towering atrium of the Interstellar Dueling Championship. Michael Connor paused at the threshold, his worn leather boots a stark contrast to the liquid metal floor that rippled beneath each step. The station's artificial atmosphere carried the sharp tang of ozone from energy weapons and the subtle perfumes of a dozen alien species. Above him, holographic banners showcased past champions. The Serpentine Grandmaster, Seth with her gravitational blade, Commander Vex 9, and his quantum phase weapons, and most prominently, the current champion, Cathor of the Valadar. The four-armed alien's image dominated the central space, his ceremonial armor gleaming with embedded power crystals that could have bought a small planet. Mike adjusted the leather strap of his great-grandfather's cavalry saber, the well-oiled steel catching prismatic light from the crystal chandeliers. The weapon had seen him through 3 tours in the Colonial Defense Force, but here, among technologies that could slice through battleship armor, it felt both precious and painfully obsolete. Registration for non-augmented participants is in the auxiliary hall. The bored-looking blue-skinned receptionist called out, not bothering to look up from her floating display screen. Medical enhancement services are offering a 30% discount for first-time competitors. I'm here for the main tournament, Mike replied, sliding forward his invitation crystal. The receptionist's secondary eyelids flickered in surprise as she scanned it, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. This must be a mistake. These credentials are for the human representative. The resonant voice filled the atrium, drawing every eye upward. Grandmaster Cathor descended on a gravity platform, his 4 arms crossed in various poses of amusement. The platform settled with perfect precision, and Cathor stepped forward, standing nearly 9 feet tall. I was beginning to think Earth had reconsidered sending their champion. The gathering crowd of aliens parted, their translators humming as they whispered among themselves. Mike could catch fragments. Uses processed animal hide for armor, carrying a metal blade like their historical documents. Exactly as primitive as the briefing suggested. Cathor raised one of his upper arms, and a historical hologram bloomed in the air between them. Scenes from Earth's medieval period. Knights in clanking armor swinging crude swords. I have studied your species' martial evolution extensively. Tell me, human, do you also intend to arrive on horseback? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Mike simply drew his saber, the motion smooth as flowing water. The blade caught the light, its polish revealing careful maintenance rather than ceremonial shine. Along its length, micro-etched names recorded its lineage, ancestors who had carried it from the American Civil War through the colonial expansion. An interesting museum piece, Cathor commented, his lower right hand activating one of his quantum edge blades. The weapon hummed to life, its edge literally splitting the fabric of space. He casually swung it through a nearby decorative column. The crystal structure separated with molecular precision, its top half floating serenely in place, held by the blade's stasis field. Perhaps after the tournament, we can find a nice display case for it. Mike returned the saber to its scabbard with a precise click. My great-grandfather used this blade to hold the line at New Shanghai, when the electromagnetic storms knocked out every energy weapon in the sector. Sometimes the old ways are worth keeping. Charming. Cathor deactivated his blade with a flourish. The betting halls are offering 1,000 to 1 against your survival past the first round. I look forward to proving them optimistic. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and human, when you inevitably forfeit, do try to announce it before any permanent damage occurs. The medical facilities here are excellent, but they have limited experience with historical reenactment injuries. As Cathor's gravity platform whisked him away, Mike felt the weight of alien stares. He approached the registration desk, boots clicking against the liquid metal floor. The receptionist's hands shook slightly as she processed his entry, her eyes darting between his saber and the still floating half of the crystal column. Tournament matches begin in 3 hours, she said. Would you like directions to the Medical Enhancement Center? Mike shook his head, already heading toward the practice halls. He had preparations of his own to make, ones that didn't require technology more advanced than steel and skill. The practice halls of Station Nexus 7 buzzed with pre-tournament energy. Holographic readouts displayed competitor statistics while maintenance drones scurried about, repairing damage from warm-up matches. Michael Connor sat cross-legged in a corner, methodically oiling his saber with smooth practice strokes. His first opponent, General Vextrol of the Hegemony, stood across the hall, technicians swarming around him as they calibrated his neural-enhanced battle suit. The alien's exoskeleton hummed with computation crystals, each one programmed with combat algorithms refined over centuries. "Your first match begins in 5 minutes," announced a floating service orb, its translator producing perfectly accented English. The medical team reminds all competitors that emergency transponders must be. It paused, scanners whirring as they processed Mike's equipment. "Sir, I don't detect your emergency transponder." Mike stood, sliding the saber home in its scabbard. "Don't need one." But Regulation 7B clearly states, Check Exemption Clause 3. Unaugmented biological competitors may decline emergency systems at their own risk. He smiled at the orb's confused bobbing. I read the rulebook. The match chamber was a perfect sphere of translucent energy fields, allowing the gathered audience to view from all angles. Vextrol's battle suit gleamed under the lights, its surface shifting like liquid metal as combat programs initialized. His weapon, a monomolecular glaive, extended to full length with a crack of displaced air. "Begin," the chamber's AI announced. Vextrol moved with machine precision, the glaive tracing lethal patterns through the air. His suit's targeting system projected probable strike zones in augmented reality, calculating the mathematically perfect attack sequence. The alien general had won 37 matches with this combination. Mike stepped forward, boots finding perfect purchase on the frictionless floor. The saber cleared its sheath with a whisper of steel on leather. No electronics, no augmented reality, no combat predictions, just generations of human warfare distilled into muscle memory and steel. The glaive struck like lightning. Mike's blade met it with a simplicity that confused the automated scoring systems. No parry should have worked against a weapon moving at those speeds. Yet when the exchange ended, Vextrol's perfect geometric attack pattern had somehow collapsed. "Impossible," the general growled, his suit's processors recalculating. "The combat algorithms are never wrong." Mike's response was a technique that hadn't seen use since the American Civil War, a cavalry disarm modified for zero-gravity combat. The saber moved through a deceptively simple arc, using the glaive's own momentum against it. Vextrol's weapon clattered to the floor, its monomolecular edge automatically deactivating. The chamber fell silent. In the observer's gallery, a young Nexian child tugged at their parents' environmental suit. Why didn't the human's weapon display any power readings? Mike heard the question through the chamber's acoustics. He sheathed his saber and bowed to his defeated opponent before approaching the gallery's window. "This blade doesn't need power readings," he explained, drawing it partially to show the practiced care in its maintenance. "Every scratch tells a story. This nick here, that's from the Battle of New Shanghai, when my great-grandfather faced down 3 powered suits with nothing but steel and skill." The child's compound eyes widened. "But how do you calculate attack vectors without combat algorithms?" "We don't calculate them," Mike smiled. "We feel them." Humans learned to fight long before computers existed. Each generation added their knowledge, teaching their children when to strike, when to parry, how to read an opponent's body language. The betting odds shifted dramatically in the background displays. Vextrol's technical team huddled around screens, trying to understand how their perfect combat software had failed against primitive techniques. A weapons master from the Corward Kingdoms approached Mike as he left the chamber. "Your blade," the alien gestured with one of its sensory appendages. "May I?" Mike carefully handed over the saber. The weapons master held it with reverence, analyzing it with both technological scanners and practiced eyes. Fascinating. The balance, the wear patterns, This weapon has been used in real combat, not just ceremonies. Every conner who carried it added their own lessons, Mike explained. Steel remembers, if you know how to listen. The weapons master returned the blade with a formal vow. Perhaps, they said thoughtfully, there are some things algorithms cannot quantify. Above them, the tournament brackets updated. Michael Connor advanced to the next round, his victory categorized as Method, Classical Earth Techniques. The betting systems crashed briefly, unable to calculate odds for a fighting style their databases couldn't categorize. Grandmaster Thor paced in his private chamber, all four arms twitching with agitation as he reviewed the holographic replays. The humans' matches played out before him in perfect detail, yet something eluded his understanding. His lower right hand absently tapped commands into the analysis system, trying to decode Michael Connor's movements. Run Combat Pattern Analysis 7, he commanded. The AI complied, breaking down Mike's latest victory against the tournament's third seed, a Caldarian blade dancer. The alien champion had wielded a personal shield generator that should have been impenetrable, until Mike had somehow bypassed it with a technique that looked deceptively simple. Analysis inconclusive, the AI reported. Subject demonstrates no consistent attack patterns. Each engagement appears to be unique, adapted to specific opponent parameters. Thor slammed one fist into the wall, leaving a dent in the reinforced metal. Impossible. Every fighter has patterns. Show me his training protocols. No training protocols detected. No enhancement signatures. No neural augmentation. No. What do you mean, no protocols? Thor interrupted. He's defeating champions with centuries of enhanced combat experience. There must be something. The door chimed, admitting his strategic advisor, Velorn. The serpentine alien glided in, her scales shifting colors with concern. The human's next match begins in 20 minutes. The betting houses are in chaos. His odds have shifted from 1,000 to 1 to nearly even. Thor gestured at the frozen holoprojection. Look at this sequence. The Caldarian's shield was rated to stop particle beams, yet this primitive blade somehow slipped through. There must be hidden technology we're not detecting. Perhaps, Velorn suggested, we're asking the wrong questions. Our analysis assumes advanced technological solutions, but humans evolved differently from most spacefaring races. In the public arena, Mike was preparing for his next match. The cameras zoomed in as he performed what appeared to be a ritual, carefully cleaning his saber, checking its edge, and moving through a series of flowing practice forms. The audience watched in fascination as he demonstrated a disarming technique to a group of young aliens. This move, Mike explained, his voice carried by the arena's acoustics, was developed by Italian masters in the 16th century. They found that when facing superior weapons, direct opposition often meant death. Instead, they learned to redirect force. He demonstrated with slow, precise movements. Every limitation became an opportunity for innovation. Thor's upper eyes narrowed as he watched. Query historical database. Earth's combat evolution. The AI projected a timeline of human warfare. Unlike other species who developed energy weapons and quickly abandoned physical combat, humans had maintained parallel traditions. Even as they reached for the stars, they preserved and refined their ancient fighting arts. Fascinating, Velorn whispered. They treated their limitations as features, not bugs. Each generation built upon the last, creating layers of martial knowledge that didn't rely on technology. The match began. Mike's opponent, a Nexian war prince, activated a quantum phase blade that could theoretically cut through any material. The alien's augmented nervous system allowed him to strike faster than human reflexes could follow. Yet somehow, Mike's ancient blade was always just elsewhere. Pause. Thor commanded. Analyze his footwork. The AI highlighted Mike's movements. Pattern recognized. Technique similar to documented Earth practice called measure of ground. Fighter maintains optimal distance while creating false targets. Note, effectiveness should be limited by human reaction speed. Should be, Thor growled, yet isn't. How? The match ended with the War Prince's quantum blade embedded in the arena floor. Mike had seemed to stumble, a moment of human weakness, except that stumble had drawn his opponent into overcommitting. The ancient steel blade now rested gently against the Nexian's environment suit seals. In the post-match interview, a journalist asked Mike about his combat computer specifications. The human laughed. No computer, just training, practice, and the collected wisdom of centuries of swordsmen who had to fight smarter because they couldn't fight stronger. Thor switched off the projection. Gather everything we have on human martial arts history. If technology isn't his advantage, I need to understand what is. He flexed all 4 arms, activating his quantum blade array. Before I face him myself. Velorn's scales shifted to a worried violet. And if understanding eludes you, impossible, Thor declared, but his lower hands were trembling slightly. No primitive technique can stand against mastery of the universe's fundamental forces. The tactical display continued silently cycling through Mike's victories, each one displaying the same conclusion. Analysis inconclusive. The Grand Exhibition Hall of Station Nexus 7 gleamed like a frozen supernova, its crystal walls refracting light from 1,000 stars. The pre-semifinal ceremony had drawn dignitaries from across known space, their varied environmental suits and ceremonial armor creating a living tapestry of galactic culture. Thor stood at the center of the demonstration arena, his 4 arms extended in perfect geometric alignment. Each hand gripped a quantum edge blade, the weapons humming with barely contained power. Above him, holographic displays showed his movements from every angle as he began his demonstration. Behold, his voice boomed through the translation field, the pinnacle of martial evolution. His blades moved in impossible patterns, their edges literally splitting reality as they passed. A dozen combat drones materialized around him, each armed with a different weapon system. Thor's movement became a blur of precise destruction. When the light show ended, each drone had been sectioned into exactly 32 pieces, all hanging motionless in his weapon's stasis fields. The crowd erupted in appreciative clicks, hums, and phosphorescent displays. This, Thor announced, letting the drone pieces float to the ground, is true mastery, not the fumbling of primitive techniques. His upper eyes fixed on Michael Connor, who sat quietly at the edge of the arena. Perhaps our human guest would care to demonstrate his historical methods. Mike stood, his boots clicking against the polished floor as he walked to the center. The saber slid from its sheath with practiced ease, its well-maintained steel looking absurdly simple next to Thor's quantum arsenal. A true demonstration, Mike asked, his voice carrying clearly without technological enhancement. Very well. He closed his eyes for a moment, then began moving through a series of forms that seemed deceptively simple. This is the first sequence every cavalry officer learned, he explained, the blade flowing like water. It taught us how to control space, how to read terrain and movement. His feet marked precise patterns on the floor. When you fought from horseback, you couldn't rely on perfect conditions or ideal stances. Thor's lower arms twitched. Your species hadn't even achieved powered flight when these techniques were developed. How could they possibly? Because they had to work when everything else failed. Mike interrupted, continuing his demonstration. My great-grandfather taught me about the Battle of New Shanghai. Their energy weapons went dark, their combat computers crashed, but the enemy kept coming. You know what still worked. The saber caught the starlight. Steel, muscle, training. A weapons master from the Coreward Kingdoms stepped forward, their sensory appendages vibrating with interest. You train for failure, deliberately. We train for everything, Mike corrected, because the universe has a way of humbling anyone who relies on a single advantage. He shifted into a new stance. This sequence was developed by Italian masters in the 1500s. They were often outnumbered, outreached, and outarmored. So they learned to turn disadvantage into opportunity. The gathered dignitaries murmured as Mike demonstrated how the ancient technique could counter modern energy weapons. Each movement flowed naturally into the next, showing how centuries of refinement had created something both beautiful and lethal. Enough. Thor's voice cracked with frustration. Your species lacks even basic genetic enhancement. Your neural processing speed is a fraction of modern standards. Your weapon is an antique. By what right do you stand among champions? Mike sheathed his saber with a quiet click. By right of every human warrior who faced impossible odds and found a way forward. We don't need genetic enhancement to understand distance, timing, and leverage. We don't need neural processors to read body language and predict movement. Everything we needed, we built through sweat and blood and endless practice. The weapons master nodded slowly. Your combat forms, they're not just techniques, are they? They're a recorded history of problem solving. A history written in motion, Mike agreed. Every limitation forced us to innovate. Every defeat taught us something new. We learned to fight smarter because we couldn't always fight stronger. Thor's quantum blade screamed to life. Pretty philosophy means nothing against superior technology. In tomorrow's match, we'll see how well your historical techniques fare against modern reality. Mike's hand rested easily on his saber's hilt. Tomorrow it is then. Just remember, humans have a long history of surviving modern realities. The starlight caught the ancient steel one last time as Mike turned and walked away, leaving Thor standing amid the scattered pieces of his demonstration drones. Deep within Station Nexus 7's restricted archives, Thor hunched over ancient data crystals, his four arms simultaneously manipulating multiple holographic displays. The chamber hummed with quantum processors as they sifted through centuries of human military history. Vlorn watched from the doorway, her scales shifting through concerned shades of blue. You've been here for 6 hours, she noted. The final match begins in. Look at this, Thor interrupted, expanding a projection of Earth's historical battles. Every time humans encountered superior technology, they should have been decimated. Yet somehow, his upper right hand traced a battle formation from ancient Rome. They adapted, not through enhancement or technological advancement, but through pure innovation. The display shifted to show medieval knights, then colonial warriors, then modern soldiers. Each era revealed the same pattern. Humans facing overwhelming odds with seemingly primitive tools, yet finding ways to prevail. Computer, Thor commanded, cross-reference all instances of technological failure in human combat history. The AI's response was immediate. Notable pattern detected. Humans consistently maintain non-technological combat capabilities alongside advanced warfare methods. Example, modern space marines still train in primitive knife fighting despite neural-linked plasma weapons. Vlorn glided closer, her sensory appendages vibrating with interest. Most species abandoned physical combat training once they developed energy weapons. Why would humans? Because they never trusted technology to be foolproof. Thor whispered, his revelation tinged with horror. Computer, display Connor family military records. The holographs shifted, showing generations of warriors. Thor's lower eyes fixed on the Battle of New Shanghai. When the electromagnetic storms hit, every other species' warriors were effectively disarmed. But the humans, he expanded the image of Mike's great-grandfather leading a saber charge against malfunctioning battle mechs. They kept their ancient weapons functional, maintained their traditional training. Vlorn observed, not out of sentiment, but out of pragmatism. Thor's voice was harsh. Computer, analyze the Connor family saber's combat footage from this tournament. Multiple displays lit up, showing Mike's matches from every angle. The AI highlighted patterns that had been invisible to earlier analysis. Footwork from Roman legionnaires, timing from medieval duels, distance management from cavalry charges. Every limitation humans faced, Thor muttered, forced them to innovate in ways other species never considered. When we couldn't lift heavy weights, we developed powered armor. When they couldn't lift heavy weights, they developed leverage. Vlorn finished. When we couldn't process data quickly enough, we implanted neural computers. They developed techniques to read body language and predict movement. Thor's upper hands clenched. We solved our problems with technology. They solved them with technique. A new alert flashed across the displays. Analysis complete. Human combat methodology incorporates redundant systems, each technique functional with or without technological enhancement. Note: no single point of failure detected. Thor expanded one final hologram, Mike's practice session from that morning. The human moved through ancient forms with fluid grace, each motion containing centuries of refinement. We thought their limitations made them weak, Thor said quietly. But those limitations forced them to become stronger. My quantum blades can cut through anything, except they're useless without power. Their steel blades never stop working. Perhaps, Velorn suggested, her scales rippling thoughtfully. This is why the humans say necessity is the mother of invention. No. Thor's 4 arms activated his quantum blade array, the weapons humming to life. This changes nothing. My technology is still superior. My reactions are still faster. My species is still going to face an opponent who trains for every possibility. Velorn interrupted, including failure. The station's announcement system chimed. Final match begins in 1 hour. All competitors report for pre-battle protocols. Thor stared at the frozen image of Mike's practice session, at the simple steel blade that had somehow survived centuries of technological advancement. For the first time in his championship career, the Grandmaster felt something he'd never expected. Doubt. Computer, he commanded, show me everything about human backup plans. The AI's response was immediate. Warning. Detected patterns suggests humans don't believe in backup plans. They believe in making sure their primary tools never become obsolete. The central arena of Station Nexus 7 had been transformed into a massive amphitheater, its energy barriers curved to create perfect viewing angles for the countless spectators. Holographic displays connected to billions of viewers across the galaxy, each eager to witness the unprecedented final match. Michael Connor stood at the southern entry point, his great-grandfather's saber catching starlight from the transparent dome above. Across the arena, Thor's 4 arms moved in perfect synchronization as he activated his quantum blade array. The weapons sparked to life one by one, their edges burning holes in reality itself. Final match protocols engage, announced the arena's eye. Competitors, please acknowledge safety parameters. Thor's blades traced geometric patterns in the air. Acknowledged. Full combat parameters accepted. Mike drew his saber with practiced grace. Acknowledged. No restrictions needed. The crowd's murmuring grew louder at his response. No restrictions meant no emergency teleport, no medical intervention fields, nothing between the competitors and the consequences of their choices. Begin. The AI's command echoed through the chamber. Thor launched his signature opening move, the Quantum Cascade. His 4 blades created a lethal web of light, each edge capable of slicing through battleship armor. The attack pattern was mathematically perfect, covering every possible angle of defense. Mike moved like flowing water. His boots found purchase on the frictionless floor as he stepped not away from the attack, but into it. The saber moved in an arc that would have been familiar to Renaissance masters, a technique developed to counter multiple opponents with superior weapons. Impossible. Thor snarled as his perfect pattern collapsed. His lower right blade swept in for a killing stroke, only to meet empty air. Mike had shifted his weight exactly as Spanish sword masters had done when facing multiple rapiers, treating Thor's extra arms not as an overwhelming advantage, but as a problem already solved by history. The alien champion's neural processors calculated a new attack sequence. His upper arms created a horizontal slash, while his lower arms struck from below. The quantum edges hummed with enough power to vaporize steel. But Mike's footwork followed patterns refined by Roman legionnaires, who had learned to control space itself when fighting multiple barbarian warriors. His blade never met Cthor's weapons directly. It didn't need to. Every movement created a bubble of controlled space, denying the alien champion proper striking distance. Stand still and fight. Cthor's frustration broke through his usual composure. All 4 quantum blades moved in a fury of geometrically perfect attacks. Mike's response was a technique that would have been recognized by medieval knights. His saber moved in efficient arcs, each motion flowing naturally into the next. Where Cthor's attacks sought to overwhelm with superior technology and multiple angles, Mike's defense turned that complexity into a weakness. The audience watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. The gallery's tactical displays attempted to analyze the fight, but their predictions kept failing. They couldn't comprehend how a simple steel blade was negating weapons that could cut through space itself. Your primitive weapon cannot match quantum technology, Cthor declared, launching another perfect combination. The mathematics of combat cannot be denied. Mathematics don't win fights, Mike replied, his blade intercepting the one attack that mattered while letting the others waste their energy on empty air. People do. The battle shifted across the arena floor, each movement a lesson in the evolution of human combat. Where Cthor relied on computational precision, Mike moved with organic fluidity. His techniques flowed from one historical era to another, cavalry charges becoming zero-gravity transitions, gladiator footwork adapting to counter multiple limbs. The quantum blade array screamed through the air in increasingly complex patterns. But with each attack, Cthor began to understand what the historical records had tried to tell him. Humans hadn't kept their ancient combat techniques out of tradition or sentiment. They had kept them because they worked. As the battle reached its fever pitch, the gallery's tactical computers displayed a single, stunning conclusion. War-Ing. Traditional human combat techniques displaying 89% higher efficiency rating than predicted. Analysis matrices unable to process non-technological advantages. The duel had only begun, but already the galaxy was learning a crucial lesson about humanity's approach to warfare. Sometimes, the oldest solutions were the best ones. Sweat beaded on Michael Connor's forehead as he maintained his guard position, boots sliding silently across the arena floor. Cthor's quantum blade array had created a lethal web of light around them both, each edge humming with reality-splitting power. The alien champion's 4 arms moved in perfect synchronization, guided by combat computers that could calculate 1 billion possibilities per second. Then it happened. A microsecond power fluctuation in Cthor's upper right blade. So brief that even the arena's sensors barely registered it. A tiny hiccup in the quantum field harmonics, the kind of minor glitch that modern warriors were trained to ignore. But Mike had been waiting for exactly this moment. His great-grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. Technology fails. Steel doesn't. The saber moved in an arc that had been perfected by soldiers fighting through sandstorms, snowstorms, and the vacuum of space. A technique that didn't rely on perfect conditions or optimal performance. Cthor's neural processors screamed warnings as his perfect defense grid began to unravel. The quantum blade network required precise power distribution. Any interruption in the geometric pattern could cascade through the entire system. His combat computer offered 17 possible solutions, all requiring perfect technological execution. Mike didn't need a computer to recognize his opportunity. His blade flowed through forms developed by warriors who had fought in mud, rain, and darkness. Each movement anticipated not just where Cthor's weapons were, but where they had to be to maintain their quantum coherence. Impossible. Thor snarled, his lower arms compensating for the faltering upper blade. My system is perfect. The power fluctuation is within acceptable parameters. Nothing's perfect, Mike replied, pressing his advantage with techniques that predated electricity itself. That's why we train for imperfection. The gallery's tactical displays flickered as they tried to analyze the shifting battle. Cthor's quantum blade array was operating at 99.997% efficiency, a level of performance that should have guaranteed victory. But that 0.003% imperfection had created a crack in his defense, and Mike's ancient techniques were designed to exploit exactly such weaknesses. Your weapon can't even penetrate my quantum field. Thor's frustration broke through his tactical programming. All four arms moved in increasingly aggressive patterns, trying to overwhelm the human with pure power. But Mike had already shifted to techniques developed by medieval knights fighting superior numbers. His footwork, refined through centuries of combat evolution, turned Thor's aggressive momentum against him. The quantum blades sliced through empty air as Mike controlled the space between them. The power fluctuations spread through Thor's blade network like a virus. Each microsecond of imperfection forced him to adjust his geometric patterns, and each adjustment created new vulnerabilities. His combat computers proposed increasingly complex solutions, but complexity itself was becoming his enemy. Systems operating at optimal capacity. Thor's neural interface reported, recalibrating for enhanced performance. "That's your problem," Mike said, sliding past another perfect attack pattern. "You're trying to optimize. We learn to adapt." The saber moved in an arc that would have been familiar to Civil War cavalry officers, a simple, efficient strike that required nothing more than skill and steel. Thor's quantum blade array screamed in protest as its geometric perfection finally shattered. The alien champion stared in disbelief as his weapon's power fields collapsed one by one. The gallery erupted in chaos as the tactical displays showed the impossible. A steel blade had disrupted quantum edge technology not through superior power, but through the application of ancient wisdom. "How?" Thor demanded, his forearms trembling as he tried to restore his blade network. "Your techniques are centuries old. Your weapon is obsolete. Your reflexes are purely biological." Mike settled into a guard position that Roman legionnaires would have recognized. "We kept the old ways not because they were comfortable, but because they were reliable. Every time technology failed us, steel and skill were there to pick up the slack." The gallery's master computer displayed its final analysis. Warning: human combat methodology demonstrates unprecedented adaptability. Traditional techniques show superior performance in suboptimal conditions. Recommendation: reevaluate classification of primitive combat methods. Thor looked at his flickering quantum blades, then at the simple steel weapon that had undone centuries of technological advancement. Understanding dawned in all four of his eyes. Perfection was not the same as reliability. The final moments of the championship match would be studied for generations. Thor's quantum blade network, destabilized by its own pursuit of perfection, flickered like dying stars. Michael Connor's steel saber, embodying centuries of human martial wisdom, moved through ancient forms that had survived countless battles. The killing stroke never came. Instead, Mike executed a disarm technique developed by Renaissance masters, a movement designed to end fights without bloodshed. Thor's quantum blades, their geometric harmony completely disrupted, shut down one by one. The alien champion stood disarmed, all four arms frozen in disbelief. Match concluded, the arena AI announced into the stunned silence. "Victor, Michael Connor of Earth." The gallery exploded with excitement, billions of viewers across the galaxy witnessing a victory that defied conventional wisdom. But it was Thor's reaction that truly marked the moment's significance. The alien champion stepped forward, his neural processors finally quiet, and bowed with all four arms crossed in the gesture of deepest respect. "I understand now," he said, his translator struggling to convey the complexity of his emotion. "We believed technology would make our ancient weaknesses irrelevant. But your people. We learned from our weaknesses." Mike finished, sheathing his saber with practiced care. "Every limitation became a lesson. Every failure taught us something new." The weapons master from the Corward Kingdoms approached, their sensory appendages vibrating with excitement. "The Council of Grand Masters requests permission to study human martial traditions, not to replace our methods, but to understand your approach to combat evolution." Mike smiled, reaching into his jacket to withdraw a worn leather notebook. My great-grandfather's training journal. He always said knowledge should be shared. He handed it to the weapons master. The first lesson is the hardest. Sometimes you have to empty your cup before you can fill it again. Within days, the impact of the championship rippled through Galactic society. The Central Academy of Combat Arts established Earth's first off-world classical warfare school, with Mike as its head instructor. Students from 1,000 worlds came to learn not just techniques, but a philosophy of combat that transcended technological advancement. Thor became one of the first students, his 4 arms now holding traditional steel blades. The quantum edges were perfect, he explained to a group of novices, but perfection is fragile. Steel forgives, steel adapts, steel remembers. In the training hall, Mike walked among students of various species, each discovering how their unique anatomies could apply human martial principles. A young Valadar struggled to modify a cavalry saber technique for their 4 arms, while a Serpentine Nexian learned how Roman shield tactics could apply to their coiled fighting style. The greatest warriors in human history, Mike lectured, his great-grandfather's saber on display beside examples of advanced weaponry, weren't those with the best technology. They were the ones who understood that combat is chaos, and chaos demands adaptability. The Academy's success led to a revolutionary change in galactic military doctrine. Species that had relied purely on technological advancement began incorporating traditional training methods. Combat computers and neural processors became aids rather than crutches. The old ways were rediscovered, not as relics, but as foundations. 1 year after the championship, Thor and Mike demonstrated their new hybrid fighting style. Quantum blades moving in patterns inspired by ancient Earth sword forms. The display proved that technology and tradition could coexist, each strengthening the other. We thought we had outgrown the old ways, Thor admitted to the graduating class. But humans showed us that true evolution doesn't discard the past, it builds upon it. Mike stood at the Academy's observation dome that evening, watching ships from across the galaxy bring new students eager to learn. His great-grandfather's saber hung at his side, its well-worn grip containing generations of wisdom. A visiting dignitary asked him if he ever regretted not upgrading to modern weapons. Mike drew the saber, starlight dancing along its polished edge. "This blade has stories to tell," he replied. "And now, thanks to what happened here, those stories will be heard across the stars." The Academy's motto, displayed in every training hall, summed up humanity's greatest lesson to the galaxy. Technology changes, principles endure.